Welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a superhero movie review, and I'll be having a look at the 2013 The Wolverine. So this is based on a sort of classic Wolverine story where he kind of goes into Japan, where it's loosely based on, and it actually follows the events of X-Men 3 really, compared to any of the other sort of X-Men films. It's really a sequel to that film more than sort of anything else, but really it's just a kind of a standalone story. You don't really have to sort of have seen particularly any of the X-Men films to get the majority of what's going on. However, there are some elements of X-Men 3, namely Jean Grey, that actually has a surprising amount of screen time in this movie. And really it takes the story takes place when a sick Japanese man basically calls Wolverine to Japan to thank him for saving his life back in World War II. And while he's there, he meets his sort of granddaughter Mariko, and they kind of become close. The old guy is actually the head of this massive company in Japan, the biggest sort of technology company in Japan, and there's the various factions sort of vying for power and sort of control of this sort of obviously this massive industry, and there's kind of lots of yakuza and ninjas and stuff all kind of fighting over, plus another mutant called Viper who is kind of embroiled in this mystery as well. I won't say too much in regards to the plot, because it's obviously a new release at the time I'm doing this video, so I don't want to give too many spoilers away. So what's good about this film? It is miles better than the original Wolverine film, and you know, stands up well if you look at the kind of the better X-Men films. It's a very different take on the X-Men franchise. It's a lot slower and the kind of almost a lot smaller scale, but I think it benefits from that. And it almost reminds me, if you've seen the film The Hunted starring Christopher Lambert, it kind of reminds me of that film more than anything else. And it almost, the kind of the first 2/3 of this film really are more of a kind of crime / martial arts film compared to a kind of superhero film. Obviously you've got Wolverine in there, but for the most part it plays more like a kind of, let's say, like almost like a yakuza film basically. Now the last kind of portion of this film kind of gets a little bit sci-fi, and I have to admit I wasn't so keen on what they've done with this sort of Silver Samurai. It goes so against what the rest of the tone was like. It was kind of almost a bit kind of more grounded, really, kind of a little bit more realistic, and there's a bit more character driven, and they kind of go into more of a bit of a kind of sci-fi sort of cliches in regards to kind of the last act of this film. That said, I think Hugh Jackman was absolutely great. This is by far his kind of best performance as Wolverine. He gets some real depth with it. You know, he's got, I think, a believable kind of love story with Mariko, who gets a lot more screen time than you may think, because she wasn't really in any of the advertising for this, but she's in the film a fair amount. And she's also got this kind of like sort of friend he makes there called Yukio, who's basically the one who kind of gets him from when he's kind of like this kind of mess in sort of Canada somewhere, and brings him to Japan. They kind of become friends, and she's kind of like almost like the adopted sister of Mariko. The action was really good. Sometimes the camera kind of gets a little bit too shaky for its own good, but I think that's more or less to sort of keep the kind of ratings down, to sort of show you what's, you know, so you get the idea about what's going on, to not really be too graphic. And there's one scene sort of early on where Wolverine, you've probably seen in the trailers, where he kind of starts to lose his kind of powers. And I get the impression that the kind of the shake cam is meant to be because, you know, he's obviously stunned and kind of doesn't really know what's going on. So it's kind of meant to be sort of showing you from his point of view almost that, you know, things aren't quite as clear cut as they was. Now in regards to that, I had a kind of a little bit of a problem in that I didn't think that was as clearly defined as it could have been. I guess this isn't really a spoiler because it's in the previews really. But basically there's a kind of a plot really to try and get Wolverine's powers off him, and this was the kind of the idea that the old man wanted to bring him over in the first place, was to sort of offer Wolverine this gift of taking away his powers so he can die kind of an old natural death, and this guy could live. However, Wolverine doesn't want to do that, and so ultimately his powers are taken from him. But we get the idea that he's got some healing factor left, but we don't really know what's extent, because there's kind of conflicting information. In one scene we're told he's kind of more like a normal guy, and then we're sort of told by Wolverine himself his powers aren't working as much, he's not healing as much, but we get the impression he still has some. So I would have liked him to have been a bit more sort of defined about what's actually happening. He still does stuff which seems superhuman, and he still takes up a fair bit of damage, so that's kind of a bit of a minor issue I had with it. But overall, a thoroughly good film. I think James Mangold did a good job. I think Hugh Jackman was fantastic as Wolverine, and you know, he's a bit like Robert Downey Jr. in the fact that I really can't see anyone else at the moment really taking over the Wolverine role. So, and fair play to him. Hugh Jackman seems like he's, you know, very up for taking on more action as Wolverine, as we'll see him in Days of Future Past. So I'm going to give this film a 7.5 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I suggest you go check it out. Bye for now.